Welcome to the CG Pro podcasts. Tonight we have a very special guest with us, Luc Delamare. Luc is the head of technology at a company called Impossible Objects, and we'll introduce him in just a second. If you enjoy this podcast, you can follow us, CG Pro, at becomecgpro.com. We also have a Facebook group, and we're a school. So if you want to find out more about our classes, you can go there and find out more information. But tonight we are here for the podcast, and Luc Delamare is our guest. Luc is, as I said, the head of technology at Impossible Objects, a pioneering studio using real-time technology, particularly Unreal Engine, to create final pixels to a very high quality and standard in commercials and other formats. And Luc has a really unique set of skills in combination, a rare skill set in coming from both cinematography and visual effects, as having been a cinematographer and a visual effects supervisor. And that puts him in a unique position to be able to be an expert in virtual production, an emerging new industry. So, Luc, welcome. Great to have you here.
Thanks, Ed. Thanks for the kind words. Great to be here.
So I always love to start these off by just asking you a little bit about how you got into filmmaking and visual effects, for that matter. Were there some early inspirations that kind of made you realize this is what you wanted to do for a living when you grew up?
That's a great question. Although I'm sure I'm not going to go give the full origin story. I'm sure it'll get very long. But I think I've had a full circle situation here where I was brought into film because I was actually interested in visual effects from a very young age in high school and even middle school, actually. And so that kind of led me to film school in undergrad, where I then kind of learned about cinematography and kind of pivoted towards being a DP, graduated and kind of started a career as a cinematographer, but kept up my visual effects kind of skill set and was kind of a freelancer all around. And then in kind of recent years now, as virtual productions come about, I've kind of come back around and realized that, while I've spent the last, decade kind of shooting and learning about cinematography and just the language of cinema, I'm now kind of getting to revisit my kind of initial interest that kind of sparked it all, which is visual effects and imagery and kind of the technology behind it. So hence my focus at Impossible Objects.
Was there a movie? Was there something that like lit you up and made you realize that you wanted to do visual effects? Because not everybody knows what that is, or understands that it's a job, or that it's a job that they could actually do. Was there? I had a movie that made me want to do it. Did you have?
Well, I want to hear
Mine was Jurassic Park.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, yeah, of course.
Classic.
You gotta.
Yeah.
Mine was also kind of, somewhat cookie cutter. It was lightsabers. Obviously a huge Star Wars fan, but it was actually learning how to rotoscope in middle school. Can't say that I was doing it on my lunch break, but I became very interested in Photoshop and After Effects. So in a nutshell, kind of a child of Andrew Kramer, for those of you who know about Video Copilot. So kind of was brought up in that category, and then kind of shifted away into cinematography. But yeah, it was lightsabers. That simple.
Right. So like making your own lightsaber shorts.
Yeah, exactly. Just goofing around, making videos where just people would be like, how the heck did you do that? That kind of thing. A lot of, I'm sure everyone's seen this wonderful documentary about the origin story of ILM, but, just right there, that kind of thing, but just a different era, I feel like. So.
Right. Yeah, I'm slowly chipping away at it.
Yeah.
I don't have as much time to watch television as I used to, since I had children, started the business. But I'm thoroughly enjoying it. Seen a couple of episodes, and it's amazing to see its humble beginnings. And sometimes you look at those movies that have had massive success and became huge, vented the industry, became huge companies, that they started in very humble beginnings, and with people figuring out how to do it.
Yeah.
So it was Star Wars and you making your own Star Wars. How did you find out that it's something that you even
That's
could
a
do
good
at that
question.
age?
I think my neighbor gave me a pirated copy of Photoshop. Is like if you could pinpoint the exact, inception
Yeah.
date, that would be it would be Photoshop. So just my fascination with just modifying imagery and eventually learning that you could use those tools to help tell a story. In a way that no one else could, especially at the age that I was kind of exploring this kind of thing. I thought it was amazing. So
So taking it a little further than your experiments in Photoshop, how did you progress it into actually getting your first job in the industry?
yeah, well, I'm trying to think. Funny enough, the founder of Impossible Objects, Joe Sill, were really really good friends and go back a long time. He's a director and also does visual effects. Um, we both kind of had this fascination with it, and so even though I was kind of shooting and kind of had a career as a cinematographer, I still had this huge interest in just furthering being able to kind of deliver these things. I remember finishing undergrad thinking I would be a cinematographer who could shoot a visual effects music video and do the visual effects, and just have this cohesive view of the whole project. And even though at that point in my career, I did not understand, what kind of complications you get when you think about a giant movie's visual effects pipeline and the process behind that. But I was starting to understand that like if you have this view and understand the tools at every end of the spectrum, things can go a lot more smoothly, and you can help communicate a story and just your ideas in a lot more efficient manner. Since we all know visual effects kind of take a long time, so yeah, kind of roundabout answer there, but
So you studied cinematography,
yeah,
filmmaking.
yeah, I would say that was my focus in undergrad at film school. I went to Loyola Marymount in Los Angeles.
Got it. And was your first work in cinematography or in visual effects
Um, I mean, I'd
or
have to
both?
say both. My thesis, I shot and did the visual effects. It took place on a train that we shot on a soundstage. So I was just kind of always in parallel doing it, and I just found more success and I wouldn't say more joy in shooting, but I had a crew. As a cinematographer, you have this kind of core team, and I was never a staff artist at a VFX house. At that point in my career, so I kind of stuck with the live action front because that's where my community was.
Got it. So did you kind of come up through the ranks as a cinematographer and gaffing and camera assistant,
Yeah, yeah,
that kind of thing?
you kind of do that. Everyone there's so many ways to kind of rise the crew ranks in film and especially in Los Angeles. Um, you know, uh, but I would say yeah, I was kind of very fascinated with light. I for a long time was completely happy to be a gaffer. Just because I was fascinated with the tools behind it. I'm always interested in the tech behind creating these images, but ultimately realized that obviously the role of a cinematographer, you still have more control, but you do have to relinquish, certain things, especially at certain tiers. So I came to kind of accept that. But yeah, I did kind of rise a little bit of those ranks. Yeah.
Early question coming in already from somebody asking, particularly other than Photoshop, what
Oh
kinds
yeah.
of software did you find yourself getting into in the early days in visual
Yeah, it
effects?
was a Photoshop. Probably within a month, I switched to After Effects, realizing that I needed more than one frame.
Yeah,
And then also, I've Blender. I've used Blender since I mean for uh, I've used After Effects for almost like 16 or 17 years, but I've used Blender for longer than that. So I've always had this like understanding of a 3D space. Maybe not how I can't say I was an advanced user in the slightest, but I had experimented with that, and so I had this understanding, as basic as it was, of just operating within a digital three-dimensional space.
got it. So pre 2.8,
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah.
right? That was when I started getting interested in it. Um, but yeah, so you used Blender quite extensively, more so than some of the other more typical
Um,
software like Maya and
Yeah,
those
yeah. I
kinds of
mean,
things?
yeah, I didn't in high school I did like a film program in high school and it was just After Effects and doing visual effects that way. Um in college I did take some visual effects classes. I did post viz and previs in college actually, and consider myself very fortunate to have been able to kind of step away from what was a normal production curriculum and to kind of learn a little bit about how visual effects are done. But yeah, rising through those ranks, no, it was I was a very late bloomer to both Maya and now Nuke as well. So
So, based on that, how do you feel about the software progression and well, I should say, how do you feel about some of these kind of newcomers to visual effects? Blender is always used to be seen as a hobbyist tool
mhm,
until about basically 2.8. It started to be
mhm.
seen more as a
Yeah,
serious 3D program that actually people were using professionally, and now it seems to be getting more and more traction. And then some others as well. What are your thoughts on the
that's a good
changing
question. I
landscape?
feel like that's a somewhat of a heated debate, because there's
Yeah,
a lot of there's a lot of perspectives about this. Personally, I love Blender, and objectively, I think it is a very powerful tool. And I mean, it's always being updated, and there are lots of things one could argue it does better than some of the other competitors. The main issue being in a more rigid pipeline and established VFX and post houses, it just doesn't have a home. So unfortunately, I think it's a great tool to learn the concepts behind things. But there's always going to be difficulty with like doing a full pipeline that includes Blender or those kinds of tools. So
are you guys using it at
we
Impossible Objects?
yeah, it's I mean yes we do, but we're primarily if it's not in Unreal, which the core of our business is
Yeah.
Unreal, and I'm sure we'll talk more about that with virtual production. But for animation, we still Maya is still kind of the reigning champ.
Cool. Yeah, it's always interesting question for me to ask people because I know that um, I learned Maya as well because everyone in the industry used Maya, and it's still the case that a lot of the big studios and even smaller studios as well. It's just been there for a long time.
Yeah,
It's well ingrained into people's pipelines, and it's hard to wean people off. There's also the skill set
yeah,
question where the artists are all trained in that software,
yeah.
not trained in others so much. But I'm interested to see as people are starting to bring in some Blender to
Mhm.
even really big houses, maybe not
Yeah.
in the pipeline, but to be able to
No, as
create
a
some things
specialty
to
tool,
throw in.
no. And, being
Yeah,
somewhat of a nimble studio too, that, it's an advantage we have. We're kind of building a pipeline, not from scratch, but because, we're kind of getting to do things the way we want to with virtual production. So for us, it's always about, what's the right tool for the job. It's not necessarily what do we have to use, because that's what everyone else is using, or that's what this vendor is delivering with, or, things like that. Um, yeah.
yeah. Well, the as my friend's radio show is titled "Life Changes," and I think we're seeing a lot of this. It's coming into visual effects now.
Yeah.
There are things that people said would never happen that are now currently happening.
Yeah. Oh,
So
yeah.
an exciting time of a lot of change, and um, I was drawn to your guys' work at Impossible Objects by the quality of what was produced in um, the Diablo project
Mhm.
in Unreal Engine, and I
Oh,
was
thank you.
very impressed by that, and hadn't to that point seen tons of examples of people really pushing Unreal's
Mhm.
renderer to a high level in production.
Mhm.
Um, so I really I think it's quite remarkable what you guys are doing and sticking to, as you said, to Unreal Engine as a core tool,
Mhm.
as opposed to something used for previs that then leads to something else.
Mhm.
You're really I think it's studios like yours, that are going to help move this forward. So
We hope so.
yeah, so just to talk about that for a second,
Yeah.
what um, I guess what encouraged you to feel like Unreal was a tool that could be used for final imagery?
That's a great question. My first exploration with Unreal, I have to credit to John McKinnis Studios and a challenge a fellow virtual production cinematographer, Kevin Stewart and I did together, where we kind of just quickly learned that as a place to quickly iterate with light and texture, as opposed to the daunting task of like when you open Maya and what you're looking at, or even Blender, what you're looking at. Just being able to so quickly bring things in, and the ecosystem that Unreal kind of has, despite it, being a game engine, but just kind of opening these doors, and they've done so much work to kind of to make it more friendly to a film production pipeline. Yeah, it became quickly clear to us that with the right mindset and the right approach, this tool was completely valid. And the more we kind of explored it, and the more we talked with the community about it, which was obviously a huge kind of outpouring for this, right, in the last 2 or 3 years, especially over like the early pandemic when everyone was locked up and just kind of like, what software should I learn? It seemed like that was a big ticket item. So
Yeah, makes sense. How did that come about? How did that project come about? You were took part in the short Sandspeed. I think you actually won,
yeah,
if
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
correct.
yes, I guess we did. Yeah, I think what happened was I found myself my like so much of the world, the kind of career took a pause when we all kind of shut down, and in the during that pause, I was still eager to kind of create and do something creative, and I hadn't done visual effects. Kind of professionally in a bit, and just was always just toying around. And this challenge came up, and I remember I opened Unreal at one point and was like, oh, no, thank you. And I closed it because I just didn't have the mindset. But then revisited it over this kind of pause, and just spent 30 days kind of diving into it and learning how to translate my knowledge from all the other softwares that I had built um, with visual effects in general, and just realized that I could just connect these dots of like, oh, the lighting that I do in live action, I can now just really quickly just lay out on the table, um, and see something, just insanely high fidelity for how easy and quick it was, and things kind of exploded from there.
So where did the idea for the short come from?
Yeah, that was part of the challenge from McKinnis Studios. They provided a scene. I'm sure some of the people in this community here may have even like taken part in it. There was like a blank
John
Unreal
McInnes
scene.
is actually listening, and he says
Great.
hi.
Oh, great. Hey, John. Great to see you. Yeah. No, I mean, it was great. There was I think it was a scene was provided that had some really high fidelity, both mocap and a really high fidelity, essentially like an early, not a metahuman, but it was like pre-metahumans quality metahuman, just this wonderful character that was designed there. And so that was just kind of offered up to the community to kind of do something with. Um, and so it was really fun to just take something and explore it with. And it wasn't as, I had never seen that in with other softwares, or never had as, never been able to do that in just such a quick way. And so we kind of, Kevin and I took with it, we ran with it and had a blast. So
So, what was it about Unreal that appealed to you as a cinematographer? You mentioned the fact that you could do things quickly in it. You could work quickly and achieve results quickly. What else about it made you excited as a cinematographer?
I think it was also just kind of I mean, I keep saying connecting the dots, but realizing that this space that you inhabit inside of, I mean, any 3D package really. So like in that sense, it's hard to say that it was like for me it was groundbreaking because I could suddenly envision the way I would almost storyboard a movie or block a movie. I realized I could block the same way I blocked a live action commercial or narrative shoot. I could do the exact same thing in Unreal and then also light it. And then suddenly, without even trying, that was really high quality previs, if not a beautiful looking cinematic. With not very little effort, but just in a very intuitive way, where the tools were just kind of almost just converging to this point. It's not that it was just already perfect and meant for this, right? It's been the kind of the long process to get there as all these virtual production tools evolve. But at that point, there was like a switch, and just realizing that a cinematographer with a visual effects background suddenly is able to produce an animation, like a beautiful looking visualization. That was just a huge kind of a Pandora's box moment, I think.
Do you have any things that you would say to anyone, say someone who hasn't experienced Unreal Engine yet, or somebody who's from the filmmaking world or the
Mm-hmm.
visual effects world, who's curious about it? What would you recommend for them to do to explore what it's capable of?
Yeah, that's obviously a tough question because it's such a case by case basis. I get a lot of people asking, like directors thinking, oh, if I learn Unreal, like, can I previs my own stuff? Or cinematographers wanting to do lighting viz, or even just actually doing animation, actually doing a cinematic, right? There's so many different use cases, or even just understanding the tool for LED volume workflows and things like that, right? Because the branch of this tool kind of spreads far and wide. Um,
Yeah,
my recommendation would be to I mean, it depends on what would work best for like what that individual might need to do, but it may be daunting to look at, but if you have a good reason for it and you're kind of the type of person who likes to have their hands in it, or it's such a great tool for you know visualization in general, and that happens to kind of um, elevate a whole lot of workflows, animation, virtual production volumes, the whole thing. So I'm trying. I know I'm not actually giving advice here. I'm trying to decide what the answer is.
well, you can have already some well, you said that having purpose, having something that you're actually trying to accomplish, and
Yeah,
I guess that having that short was one of those, one
exactly.
example of
I
it.
will say that this would be hard advice: is don't download any software without a goal in mind.
Right.
That you'll immediately shut it down. No one wants to watch tutorials without an end in sight. Um, so do it to build something that makes you happy. That if you enjoy being creative in that sense. And obviously people who are already in post production and visual effects have an advantage to that. But I'm definitely of this mindset of I'm trying to bring people from live action who can use this as a tool. That yeah, maybe not, maybe your average live action cinematographer, it doesn't need to learn this tool to light the scenes for their volume shoots, but just understanding the language of this is a lot easier than one would think.
Right. Yeah. What are some of the useful things for cinematographers, for filmmakers? Because as you said, visual effects people feel like it feels like it's a familiar world to them
Mm-hmm.
because they're in a 3D environment.
Yeah,
It's translation to a different tool set, but for filmmakers, it's brand new. A lot of them have not been in 3D software before.
yeah.
What some of the things that they could do to help their process?
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's a plethora of courses for these kinds of things. We're speaking on CG Pro right now, but I think it would be, obviously I'm biased towards cinematography, but using it as a way to explore, how light works in a virtual sense. I know I don't know any cinematographer who doesn't think the latest Pixar movies aren't beautiful, and that's not a coincidence. That completely has to do with having this mutual understanding of what composes a beautiful image, and um, a lot of those theories and just the themes behind cinematography apply to any form of art, obviously. But so, like, of course, it applies to virtual production and Unreal Engine as well. And so it's just another like canvas to kind of explore this kind of thing that happens to be free. It happens to be a major tool that's kind of being explored in virtual production in general, and it happens to be pretty quick to learn compared in comparison to some other packages. So
Right. Yeah, compared to how long it takes to learn Houdini, for example.
yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Um, and any thoughts for the visual effects community? Because what it feels like to me is that the filmmakers are learning computer graphics, and in this new thing called virtual production. Filmmakers
Mhm.
are learning computer graphics,
Mhm.
and computer graphics people are now having to learn filmmaking. And even though you would think that visual effects people would know about filmmaking, it's very often
Mhm.
siloed into making single shots and not really understanding the entire
Yeah.
filmmaking process. But now this really encourages the knowledge of that, which I think people don't have as much from that camp.
Yeah. I think it's kind of I kind of have a two-part answer because I think there's a lot that traditional animation pipelines can now learn and are already exploring with virtual production, but then also like animation within visual effects, but then also just kind of visual effects and the FX end of visual effects. So I'll start with animation, and that is one where, and that's something we're doing at Impossible Objects, is kind of exploring the idea of um, the nonlinear process, the nonlinear aspect of virtual production, and in the sense that you're not kind of glued to this, stage A, stage B, stage C, and if you got to fix stage A, you got to go through all the stages again. A lot of traditional animation is like that, and there's definitely exceptions. Obviously, the lineage pipelines get a lot of bash in the virtual production community. The reality is there's always going to be a linear component to production. That's just how time works.
Right.
But
So far as we know, yeah.
yeah, so far as we know, who knows as we explore the metaverse what happens. But where was I going with this? Oh, I was just saying that the same way that like motion capture and just the idea of blocking an animation piece with mocap or things like that is really elevated how animations are made. In our eyes at Impossible Objects, the same goes for just using Unreal as this tool where it's this, time is a flat circle situation where we're kind of kit bashing while we're doing layout and previs, and everyone's kind of learning at the same time, much like you would on a live action set where you're all physically present and you're all seeing the same things happen. That's not normally the case with visual effects. So that's where I guess that's my tie into visual effects here is that instead of having to, do do the post viz to understand the shot that's going to be done down the line and then wait for the effects to happen. You're kind of trying to see a little bit more of it as it goes. And so I'm always personally trying to use Unreal as a way to help communicate visually what we're trying to do, whether or not the piece is being rendered in Unreal or not. It's to us, it's about, it's about communication.
How do you approach a new project that comes in? Do you have a like a process? Do you think like is Unreal going to do it? And you kind of decide at the beginning.
Yeah.
Do you
Is
have
there, is the first piece of paper Unreal? Yes. Or, check. Um, that depends. I won't say that we're not of the mindset that everything needs to be done in Unreal. It's more the mindset, what can Unreal help do to elevate this project, because it's part of our pipeline. Because we're not going to be stubborn about things that just either aren't there yet or things that just may not make sense or things that, the time is there to do this and do it a little slowly, then we can do it that way. But I guess the answer to that question is, it's for us, we're a world building company and we do most of our world building in Unreal. So it's kind of this ecosystem. It's kind of this place where our stories and creatives live. And so it's just based that way, and it's we kind of branch out from there, if that makes sense.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, you're using the right tools for the job, but you appreciating real-time engines for all of the flexibility that they have, even
Yeah.
if you have to jump out. I know we spoke on one of our previous conversations about Diablo
Mm-hmm.
and how basically that was all rendered in Unreal, bar some of the effects at
Mm-hmm.
work, which is still better done in Houdini, but just bits of the flames coming out of the creature's mouth, and
Mm-hmm.
but otherwise predominantly it was rendered in Unreal,
Mm-hmm. That's correct. Yeah.
right?
Yeah, no, and I mean, and even today, looking back at that piece, because that was, I think, well over a year ago now, already, just continuing to explore how those types of effects can even be done in Engine, and it's not because we want to do them in Unreal; it's because we just don't want to wait for the traditional effects pipeline. Um, if the creative or the story allows. We're not going to do a fancy rocket ship smoke sim in Unreal, but There's a surprising amount that can already be done, and I mean, every day Epic's pushing the boundary with some of the things that they're releasing, and even water. I'm sure everyone downloaded the free water thing from last month. I mean, we're all flipping out about that at the office.
Right. Yeah, and the fluids and smoke and some of the things that I are incredible. The
Yeah,
fact that they can actually run in real time, things that would have made offline renderers chug for
yeah.
hours not that long ago. Um, yeah. So what's been happening since? I know you guys have worked on an amazing new short since
Yeah,
Diablo.
yeah, we not too long ago we released a proof of concept short called Cloud Racer, which Joe Sill kind of is the kind of lead creative and director of. But that was kind of a proof of concept where it was, aside from the story and just how grand it's. I mean, just the log line, by the way, is pod racing meets Blade Runner. So that's, then that's all you need to know. It's going to be awesome. But also, just as a way to explore both mocap, we used metahumans as part of the workflow, and we were doing it like while metahumans. We started while metahumans were still in beta, and just kind of working with an inertia-based mocap suit and just kind of exploring how far we could go, just kind of keeping things in house like that. And then combining that with like the world building pipeline we had kind of already developed, so that just everything that was 100% Unreal Engine. So
Amazing. So that's something which basically anyone could do.
yeah.
Obviously, you guys have got a lot of skill, but the tools that you're using are freely available
Mhm.
to, except for the computer that you did it on and the mocap suit.
Yeah, I will say, yeah, my younger self would be like, "You spent how much on the graphics cards?" But yeah,
Right. Yeah, there's a point not very long ago where the graphics cards are more expensive than the computer.
yeah, I'm
Seems
glad
like
that
they've
we've
they've come down a
somehow
bit
come
now.
back down, and you can get a used Bitcoin mining card now, right? Hopefully, I don't know.
Even the new ones, there's sub $1,000.
Oh, good. Well, that's
Yeah,
great to
the
hear. I lucked out.
3090s.
I was a very lucky 3090, like literally jackpot. I don't know if anyone out there was like, part of those servers on how to get a card, but I was a lucky person.
You didn't have to sit in a tent outside Best Buy
No,
overnight.
when I went to Best Buy, the person who handed it to me was like, "You need to hide this as you walk out of the to the
You're
parking
gonna
lot."
get
Yeah,
you're gonna get beaten up in
yeah,
the parking lot.
yeah. That's the stage at which I got the 3090 in my personal workstation.
You put it under your jacket and
Yeah, yeah,
shuffle to the car.
yeah.
It seems like the 40s are inbound.
Yeah, I've yet to take a moment to look at all of the Nvidia stuff from today, but that's what I hear. That's what I'm seeing on our Slack.
So another question that's come in here from somebody
Yeah,
asking, is it possible objects finding that directors are coming to you for previs, or is previs still staying with storyboard artists?
that's actually a really good question. Dependent on the schedule, but a lot of the times we found that when we kick off what would traditionally be the moment to do storyboards for a client or agency, we're already prepping previs in Unreal, and things get built so quickly that there's look dev the moment that storyboards come in. And that's not to discredit how useful storyboards are, um, but it's one of those things where we kind of have to. It's a difficult thing to kind of work around as to what do you present. And this is, I'm speaking in a commercial workflow sense. This is different for narrative and how you might need to craft your own visual story. But it is it kind of happens somewhat simultaneously. And I've actually talked to a storyboard artist who asked me, like, should I be looking into Unreal, because there's a lot of parallels, and with concept art, it's almost like storyboards kind of traversing into concept art there. So
Yeah, yeah, people making cells for storyboards out
mhm.
of real-time engines because it's
Yeah,
quick
yeah.
and you don't have to be able to draw,
No, absolutely. I mean, Cinetracer, I think, has gotten pretty big. Matt Workman's software, based with metahumans and Unreal. So
right? Yeah, yeah, it means you don't have to learn Unreal to be able to produce the imagery, which is
Yeah.
great. Even though learning Unreal is not as difficult as some other 3D software, as you say, but it
Yeah.
still has a learning curve.
Yeah. No, of course. There's, yeah.
Somebody else asking a question here: Is impossible objects open for client work? People using the podcast now to pitch
To
you
how to
on
do it.
their new
My
projects.
answer there is I'm not the right person to be talking to about that, unfortunately.
We'll
Um,
pass the message on. Somebody out there wants to pitch you on a
yeah.
new project.
Yeah. If I was the one, I'd say yes to everybody, and we'd have a problem. So that's why I'm not that person.
Right. Somebody else is asking here, any favorite plugins that you've used? Do you make your own?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, we are already like internally exploring just kind of custom scripts and things like that. That it's more of a pipeline tool, but I mean, plugins in general, I think, without a doubt, and this is just yeah digging into the weeds here, but just like ultra dynamic sky is in every Unreal higher project directory of ours. Um, just as a base for if you're doing exterior work. Um, I think that's one of the most brilliant things I've seen in a while. Just how easy it is, and every software has their own version of creating a sun and a sky, and Unreal has some default ones, but that happens to be a really great plugin.
And there's the free for the month, and another not ultra dynamic sky, but a free for the month. I've forgotten the name of it, but it's very
I'll
good.
check it
It
out. I
does a
need to.
lot of the same
I
stuff.
used to be so on downloading all those things, and it's been a moment, so I think I got to catch up with those.
Get your free for the month,
Yeah.
everybody. Get it while it's free.
Mhm.
Um, so yeah, favorite. Do you guys make? So you said you're making your own, some of your own tools as well.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, we've gotten to that point where, especially with still working with other softwares and things like that, and also just streamlining the process in which we kind of shift because we do previs in Unreal, and then we've now done a project where we've animated in Unreal as well with like just not even touching Maya, and that's not our permanent goal, but we've done a little bit of that. We've done animation in
Character
Maya.
animation.
Yeah, character animation,
Yeah.
and we do obviously a lot of vehicle animation too. That's kind of our one of our main things, and all of that is done in Unreal. But then also exploring how to, still bridge Maya and Unreal, and there's a lot of tools for that. But it's one of those things where I think Unreal is in the larger industry used primarily as previs still in the big houses that aren't ready to like render a whole project in Unreal, and so we're kind of still exploring how to to use these tools and continue just finishing them in Unreal. So
Speaking of connective tissue between programs, have you guys played with Omniverse or USD very much?
yeah, I'm personally very actually interested in USD, both with Omniverse and just USD in general, because right, that they're not quite synonymous, but Omniverse is built off of USD. No, I
Yeah.
mean it's a great idea. I can't say that it's made it into like a production pipeline yet, but very eager to. We're constantly exploring that. We're very big fans of NVIDIA and partnered with both NVIDIA and Dell on quite a few projects. Um, so it's of great interest to us to kind of push that limit as well, especially because it just USD talks with so many different softwares. That's kind of the one of the main pillars behind USD, right? So
Yeah, yeah. The reason for it being
yeah,
really, yeah, it's super powerful. I think is just starting to see the industry starting to adopt it more, and
Mhm.
therefore it's being kind of pushed around by more people than Pixar. So it's
Yeah,
really exciting to see where it goes.
yeah.
But people placing some big bets on it. In fact, the Omniverse is based on it. Is a good.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So no, we're definitely. I mean, we keep a close eye on it. That's for sure.
Another question here from Sunny. Do you develop a lot of your own custom assets in-house, or do you use a lot of pre-existing marketplace and third-party sites?
That's a good question. That's also kind of a case by case situation. It's definitely both. No one can dispute the fact that Quixel Bridge and Megascans are a huge part of Unreal Engine and world building. Um, but it's not always the right tool for what's called for. So yeah, we definitely do custom things. Custom cars too. But for environment work, it really depends. We still do like layout is still very important to us, even though we're working in Unreal. It's not that we just always put a cookie cutter marketplace asset and like, oh, that's the previous environment. It's always about the story and sometimes the storyboards and kind of catering to that and just being flexible that way. So, we still employ a lot of the traditional layout tools just kind of immediately in Unreal. And that's also why I think there's been some tools in 5. I forget if it was this release or just 5 in general, but just the modeling tools in Unreal have been very useful for us and being able to kind of stay there for layout and things like that.
That's cool. Yeah, they definitely new coming from 4. What can you give us any examples of things that you've done with them
Um,
directly in Engine?
Yeah, I mean, I think the content that's out there, I mean, we've seen a lot of things. Obviously, there's a combination of the Matrix demo and things like that, where they actually in engine we're doing procedural building, things like that. We're not exploring that. That was extremely, meticulous and a long process for Epic to develop. But just being able to edit geometry in Unreal and kind of it's funny, we almost never use the word gray box because in Unreal there's really no point to doing gray box layout because you do something a lot prettier right away. But it's still kind of there to kind of help sculpt what you might be doing or crafting with an environment.
Yeah, speaking of sculpting, they actually have a pretty cool sculpting brush, even with like a Dynamesh
Mm,
kind of a thing where you can pull it about and
yeah,
really shape at least roughly the object. It's pretty cool
yeah,
to be able to do that straight in Engine.
yeah. No, absolutely.
Um, can you tell us a little bit about a bit more about Cloud Racer and
Yeah.
what kind of brought that about? What was the impetus for that?
Yeah. I mean, like I said, so it was this a proof of concept thing that was developed in house at Impossible Objects, and the goal for us was to kind of see what we could do with these tools that were just accessible, kind of like the not I don't want to say the base level of these tools, but we did mocap in house, like I said, with a Rococo suit. We did our face capture was done with the free app from Epic, and those kinds of things, and building as robust of a pipeline as we could because a lot of what the like the inertia based mocap world is not necessarily like long form content. It doesn't always work so great when you're doing extremely long shoots or recording sessions over a period of time, and also need like then you've got archiving and cleanup and all these things. And so it was an exploration into that pipeline because we were just completely fascinated with metahumans um, and just kind of immediately being able to craft a story without having to spend months and months developing this character pipeline.
Right. Have you guys been playing with the mesh to metahumans, being able to customize your own?
Yeah, yeah, a little bit too. We wish it came sooner because we definitely have always had a lot. There's been a lot of requests, like come through where it was kind of like custom metahumans, and it was prior to that. It was prior to that, being released, and our answer was we still have to resort to kind of just the traditional way to kind of do that kind of thing. But that has been definitely extremely liberating. So
Right. Yeah, makes sense. It's the hard things to do to make humans
yeah,
in CG, and it's incredible
yeah,
what they can do now with the tool, especially the mesh to metahumans. I think we've seen lots of people doing this themselves, but
yeah,
also doing really
yeah,
wacky
yeah,
alien type shapes, and yeah,
yeah,
it's pretty cool.
yeah.
It's fun times.
No, of
So
course.
I want to talk a little bit about virtual production and maybe to me it's an umbrella term that means a
Yeah.
whole bunch of things. But um, what does that mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, I would have to agree with you. I know a lot of people who think virtual production equals The Mandalorian, and like that's the math equation, um, and that's part of the equation, but it's not. That's not the formula. It is an umbrella of these tools that kind of contribute to what I think is the core of this, just the idea of this nonlinear process, being able to kind of do things in this fashion where you're kind of iterating more quickly. Um, you're working in an environment where decisions are kind of happening simultaneously, because it isn't just this traditional process of stage by stage, and it's the whole tool set that goes with that. So Unreal is a tool within virtual production. Volume stages are a tool for that as well, or kind of like the end of the pipeline in that sense. But also visualization. I mean, a lot of what we do at Impossible Object is entirely in-engine visualization. There's no live action production component, even though we do all those kinds of things. The animation we do in Unreal, we consider virtual production because we're trying to employ this process of, previs just rolling into the rest of the production. It's not previs, hard stop, take a look, figure it out, then build from there in a different software package. So it's all those things, and a lot more, and it's obviously always changing too. It's honestly hard to keep track of.
Yeah, absolutely. The terminology often comes before the techniques if people are trying to
Yeah,
explain what this stuff is, and then yeah, I agree with a lot of your points there. I think it's really interesting to highlight some of the other things that you can do with it because, as you said, a lot of people just
yeah,
think LED, big, expensive LED volume, which is impractical to a lot of people, even small companies,
yeah.
and that there's a lot of other things that you can do with it. Um, what what's been have you guys done much with green screening in?
Yeah, actually, we've done the Diablo project that you were talking about that we spoke about last time was kind of a case study with the flavor of hybrid virtual production, and I didn't coin that as well. I have to give credit to there's this virtual production field guide that Epic put out. I'm forgetting the author's name, but there's a load of that's a great resource. If you haven't sent that to the community here, you definitely should. But yeah, we have done a lot
Yeah,
of green screen stuff because we have found a lot of value in bringing these live view kind of Unreal environment tools to a set in which maybe, yeah, once again, the volume wasn't cost effective or just out of range, or for whatever reason, there needs to be post, sometimes, because obviously volume shoots, you spend a lot of money doing pre-production and on the volume, and sometimes you still need to do VFX and post, and a green screen makes more economical sense. And so we kind of bring that tool, we bring our own little virtual production cart and kind of run a live view of the environment so that you're using it as a way to help, honestly, all the departments. I mean, it starts with helping the director first and foremost, obviously, but when we bring it to a green screen shoot, it's primarily to help just the visuals be a little more cohesive so that, even if the actors aren't being able to see it while they're performing, the crew and everyone involved in sculpting the image has a more cohesive sense of the direction this shot is going in.
right. Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, I think in the live podcast, there's some links going out. So anyone interested in the field guide, you can check
Yeah,
those out.
great. Awesome.
Yeah, it's Noah Cadner.
Yeah, no, okay, great. Yeah, and there's
Yeah,
two, maybe even three volumes out now, right? I don't know.
yeah, I was aware of the second one. That's cool. There's another one as well. I mean, that's how fast it's changing.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
You need to do one every couple of months.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, talking about virtual production, how has cinematography, in your experience in cinematography, helped in this new emerging field?
Yeah. I mean, also a great question. Um, at the end of the day, I'm extremely fortunate to have kind of this background help guide me in a software or in a workflow such as virtual production, because you can have the most beautiful environment in Unreal in any software package, and if you're not capturing it with the right cinematic view, with themes, with lighting, whatever it is, camera, even just blocking, things fall apart very quickly. It's in the same sense that photorealism in CG falls apart in the blink of an eye. I think personally the same goes for lighting, and just like the fidelity of an image and what I just call just cinematic photorealism, because you know. So in that sense, I think cinematography is extremely important, and that's also why I'm always trying to just bring people like, you have this great knowledge of lighting and blocking. It can be applied virtually, and you may have not even known it.
Right. Yeah. Is there any tips for anyone who hasn't doesn't have that background?
Yeah, I mean, the if Unreal Engine is daunting, I will say Cinetracer looks wonderful for kind of figuring that out because it's the same concepts and it's built by a cinematographer. Um, so, but no, just explore. Explore with a goal in mind of like, if there's a reference image you want to try and recreate, or if you're going to watch a tutorial, do it with the goal of trying to recreate a lighting scenario that you've done in live action, or you've seen a cinematographer you look up to do in live action, because all of those things can be done. And I can say, um, drawing all the way back to the short that I did for this McKinnis challenge, that one of the first things I did in Unreal, every shot we approached as if we were physically present shooting that shot with the camera and a crew, because we knew nothing about lighting a scene in CG in Unreal in that aspect. So we just treated it as if we were there, and we learned how to use the same tools, but just in a virtual sense. And so that's where I have the most fun. I know not everyone can just kind of dive in and commit that way, but that's the draw for me, at least at the beginning.
So thinking like a cinematographer, even when you're in a totally virtual environment,
Yeah,
thinking as one would, doing the kinds of things that they would do in real shoots
yeah,
and
that's
applying that.
correct. Because it's one thing to say that I wouldn't want to say my personal style or my own aesthetic choices is always grounded in realism. There's plenty of things we do or we attempt to do where realism isn't the goal, but that doesn't mean you don't understand the language of just cinema and how to move the camera accordingly. There's plenty of Pixar movies that aren't going for photorealism, but they're extremely cinematic. And so Unreal Engine has been kind of this portal for like getting to explore that. And as soon as you download it.
It's an interesting description that people use for things. It looks cinematic. It has a cinematic look. I like people are always kind of questioning what does that mean?
Yeah. What is it? What does it mean? Yeah. It's also a difficult thing to ask. And you would get a biased response because I am a cinematographer. So
Right. It looks like things I make. That's what it looks like.
yeah, that's the shortest answer.
Um, any thoughts on this kind of explosion of AI and machine learning generated imagery that's starting
Oh
to come
man.
out?
Yeah, that was a moment I definitely jumped on like everyone did. Yeah, I mean, I don't want to like I don't have like comments on like maybe people saw the headline of an AI winning an art contest
Yeah.
thing that went viral, right? But I mean, it's amazingly fun to play with, but more importantly, extremely scary. I even saw
Yeah.
a text to video AI someone sent me where you write a
Yeah.
sentence and an AI will turn it into a video, not an image, a video. Um, so yeah, I don't know exactly what the connection, to the at some point that will connect with the metaverse and things will explode. Um,
Yeah. I think once AI equals the metaverse, then we're all doomed.
yeah,
But are there any kind of there's some things that I don't like doing the kind of grunt work that it seems like machine learning is slowly kind of picking into, and then there's the fact that you can generate your own
yeah,
concept art in a way, although it may look trippy and weird,
yeah.
but you can still, but some of it isn't. Some of it's starting to
No,
look
I mean,
like quite custom and
mood boards and references are such a huge part of, I mean, any visual craft, but especially filmmaking, and more importantly, especially like visualization, like just CG imagery. Like you always references are key. That's like the other foundation of
yeah.
at least good CG imagery, in my opinion. So yeah, in that sense, it's a great way to build a palette, without having to search for other things. Equally, I'll shout out. I really love what is it? Shot Deck is extremely
Yeah.
useful in the same sense. To me, it's like a very similar tool, just with existing, um, things that have been done. So in my mind, I consider it kind of in the same vein. Yeah, and I personally haven't gone too far. I mean, definitely used it, but I haven't. I don't have an Instagram handle with my AI imagery
Yet.
yet. Yeah.
I'm definitely fascinated to see what happens next because we've seen a lot of 2D imagery being made, even animated stuff and
Mhm.
videos, you said, and things that enhance old imagery. I'm interested to see where
Oh
it goes
yeah.
with 3D. Like we're
Yeah.
going to start seeing 3D worlds generally,
Yeah, 3D. I mean, it's not as mainstream or viral, but there's AI generated rigs.
right?
Like an AI will generate a creature that walks and it's a rig, and like there's applications for that in visualization. So,
Yeah, weird creatures.
yeah.
AI can make you weird, trippy creatures
Yeah.
and rig them and animate them for you and
Yeah.
everything. You
Yeah.
just have to say a word
Yeah.
into the
It'll
computer
be
and your work
yeah,
is done.
I am scared. That was a serious thing. I am scared. So,
So one of the last questions I was going to ask you about is what are you excited about most about the future? You could also include what you're scared about most in the
yeah,
future.
no. I mean, a great ending topic. I I think I'm most excited to see, this kind of paradigm shift in how this tool, how Unreal Engine is used, but how virtual production as a whole is used to kind of just create a new, I don't want to say wave of content. That's like the worst way to say it. I want to say just kind of these new types of projects and creatives and stories that can get told because the boring answer is, oh, because it's an accessible tool, yada yada. But in my eyes, it's no, it's more because it's just empowering, people at the source to kind of take this and take their story the whole way, and not get lost in the process. So that could be a solo, artist taking something and creating something like amazingly beautiful. It could also be a director who their project gets lost in the pipeline of who knows what, with if it takes years to do things. Um, and I think that this tool kind of helps change how those things are done. And it's not meant for everything. It's not. I don't think everything needs to suddenly start using this. Um, but the things that we like to work on at Impossible Object, we have the most fun using it. So that's why we're constantly gonna just continue trying.
Well, appreciate you trying because as I said, I think studios like yours are going to push the edge. You're willing to take risks and explore and experiment, and that's what's needed. Um, is there any way that people can follow more about you or Impossible Objects or any of your own
Yeah,
work that you want
definitely.
to share?
I'm sure the hashtags will go out. Our Impossible Objects Instagram has our latest content, and on my own handle, just Luc Delamare, I post at this point. It's transitioned from a live action career to CG to virtual production. You could see the transition there. So yeah, just go to our website. We are very big on sharing the case studies that we do, and kind of sharing how it's done. I don't think there's any production we do now that doesn't have a very large behind the scenes portion because it's just so much fun to make. But it's also like people got to know how we did this because we're just kind of figuring out and um, having a good time.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, I'm with you on that one. Basically a school teacher these days, so I'm very into sharing as well. And I think it's
Yeah.
one of the wonderful things about this new way of working is it feels so much more collaborative than filmmaking or visual effects have been in the past, and the communities that are growing around it, and these challenges that are appearing.
Mhm.
It's a really exciting time.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I'm
Well,
glad that you've got your community and what you guys do here is awesome. So I'm stoked to be talking and to be a part of it.
thank you. I appreciate it, and I look forward to bringing you guys back and talking about one of your next projects as well on
Yeah,
another webinar.
absolutely.
Well, Luke, thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight and with us. It's been a great pleasure having you on. Thank you
Awesome.
for your
Okay.
time.
No, of
Uh,
course. Thank you, Ed. And thanks everyone for listening.
yeah, thank you to everybody else out there who's joined us. And if you enjoyed tonight, then you can catch us again in a couple of weeks. You can follow us at becomecgpro.com. Thank you, everybody. Hope you have a good rest of your evening, and we'll see you soon.
All right. Thank you.